Let's go to our good friend Mike McAllister.
And let's start with a question I just asked. Syracuse 5-5, coming off a loss to Georgetown. Let's jump in our DeLoreans and go 88 miles an hour. I'm making all sorts of movie references today. At the end of the season, what is acceptable right now from where they are?
I still don't think anything outside of an NCAA tournament bid is going to be acceptable by the fans.
Yeah, I prefaced that last segment. I was, for people that are watching, like, what would be the improvement that is made that would be, you know what, this guy's got this figured out?
Yeah, I mean, if JJ comes back and they look significantly better with him back and play pretty well in ACC play and maybe sort of work their way sort of on the outside of the bubble, then I might look at the season and say, I think if they have JJ, they probably beat Notre Dame and Georgetown. And in that scenario, you really wouldn't have a bad loss at this point. Like, you'd be 7-3. Your 3 losses are to really good expected tournament teams, and you've got the ACC play and a down ACC coming up. I still think you feel like this team has a shot to make a run. So if JJ comes back, they play well, they end up maybe in the top half of the ACC because, the ACC is down a little bit. Even if you don't make the tournament, I still think that maybe you look at that and say, all things considered, that was a good bounce-back job by the coaching staff and the players to get to that point.
Looking back at this Georgetown game, Mike, Paulie and I pointed out all the things that went wrong in those final 4 or 5 minutes that allowed Georgetown to win the game. What was the biggest issue in your mind? What was the biggest thing that cost them this game?
It felt to me like the turning point was when Syracuse was up 1, Georgetown missed a free throw, got the offensive rebound, and then made a three-pointer to go up 2. It felt like the momentum at that point shifted from being on Syracuse's side, even though it was still a nip-and-tuck game, to being completely on Georgetown's side, and that Syracuse kind of stopped playing the way that had gotten them to the point where they were kind of in control of the game for a little bit in the second half. So that, to me, was kind of a key sequence, but I thought when they had that little altercation at that one point in the second half that Syracuse responded to that much better than Georgetown did, at least initially. They kind of went on a run, took a 6-point lead, had 2 or 3 possessions where they could have pushed it to 8 or 9. And when they didn't, and then Georgetown came down and had a couple of buckets and pushed it back down to 2, that was also kind of a key sequence there where it felt like Syracuse could have really put some distance between themselves and Georgetown. Those were kind of the 2 sequences that kind of were the turning point for me.
What do you make of Donnie Freeman and Chris Bell sitting out for so much of the second half?
Well, I think, I'll go back to that sequence with the altercation and then how Syracuse responded immediately after. Syracuse played really good basketball for several minutes after that point, and it was with those 2 guys on the bench. So I think it was just a scenario where Red was sticking with the guys that were playing well and got them in control of the game. I would have liked to have seen, and Chris Bell not coming in, he had really struggled in that game, hadn't made a basket. So I don't necessarily have an issue with him, but I thought Donnie Freeman in the first half was pretty good and for stretches looked like their best player and maybe the best player on the floor. So I would have thrown him back out there. Now, I also understand wanting to keep Eddie out there because he had been good. And Jair Davis had been, during the second half, Syracuse's best player. But to me, it almost feels like you should have an opportunity to play Freeman, Davis, and Lampkin together. I'm wondering if that's a possibility. Clearly, the coaching staff doesn't want to go there, or I think they would have, especially in this game. But the inability to have those guys on the floor together, I think, hurts Syracuse because they're 3 of Syracuse's best players. And it's not having a consistent shooting guard is really hurting them as well. Because as much as we like the ability of Elijah Moore, he's still a freshman, so there's some up and down to him. And Lucas Taylor, I haven't seen them give Syracuse. He hasn't given Syracuse much offensively all season. So that's kind of where I'm at. Is I'm not entirely sure on why Freeman didn't play, other than Red said after the game Jair Davis was playing well and they wanted to keep him out there. But at some point, I think you got to put your best players on the floor, and I think there was an opportunity for Johnny Freeman to play more in the second half than what he did.
And with all that being said, they now get a week off before they head down to the Barclays Center in a really important game against Maryland. How important is it? Are we overstating it, Mike, to say that this is a must-win for this team? Because, if they don't, they'll have gone through their entire non-conference schedule without a single quality win?
I think it would depend on what you...
To get to the tournament, if that's still the goal, to get to the tournament, is this a must-win?
If they're going to get to the tournament, they absolutely have to win this game. If you are of the mindset that is completely off the table, I know there's a lot of Syracuse fans that think that that's basically impossible at this point. If you're of that mindset, then no, this isn't a must-win, because none of the wins going forward really mean much if you think that's impossible to achieve. If you still are holding out hope that they can make a run, then yes, you have to win this game, and then you probably have to win at least one of your games against either Duke or North Carolina, and then win probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the rest of your conference games. I think that's kind of the recipe to get Syracuse back into the conversation. But, Maryland's a good team. Maryland is, I think, better than the Georgetown team Syracuse just played. But I think they're maybe in the same realm of like the Texas Tech kind of same caliber. So we know Syracuse can play with those teams, but they played with those teams with JJ. So it's going to be real interesting to see how that goes, and trying to make sure that this team doesn't let the Georgetown loss beat them twice.
Yeah, seriously though, I don't even know that. I think if you're going by the net ranking, Maryland's better than all of the teams besides Tennessee that Syracuse has played by a long shot. They're the good news and bad news. They're 15 in the net ranking. Bad news, they're 15 in the net ranking.
Right, yeah.
So they're a good team. So I think it's a must-win.
They're definitely a good team. They're definitely a good team, and they're a team that, if Syracuse doesn't play well, it could be a mirror image of the Tennessee game where the game gets away from Syracuse, late first half into early second half type of situation. But I don't think they're on Tennessee's level, where if Syracuse plays really well, they could still get blown out.
All right, let's turn our attention to football if we could, and the transfer portal and the next quarterback, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing right now with SU football is who's going to be the next Kyle McCord for this program. I know Caden Salter was on campus over the weekend, correct? I mean, what can you tell us about where things stand with the portal, and I guess where things stand specifically with the quarterback position?
Yeah, they've had 3 transfer quarterbacks that have visited that we know of so far. Caden Salter is one that you mentioned, Liberty transfer quarterback. Anthony Calandria, who's a Virginia transfer quarterback, was also on campus over the weekend. And then last week they had LSU transfer Ricky Collins on campus for a visit. So those are the 3 that they've visited so far. We know there were some rumblings about Connor Weigman, who the Texas A&M transfer. He has since committed to Houston. I know there were some Syracuse fans that were thinking about Miller Moss, but he has since committed to Louisville. Syracuse was never really involved with him. And there was an interesting name that popped into the portal. Well, I guess he isn't, or at least wasn't officially in the portal at that time, but announced his intentions to enter the portal. And that is Bo Prabula, who is the backup quarterback at Penn State. He is a Pennsylvania kid. He actually played against Kyle McCord in the state championship game during their high school careers when Kyle was a senior and Bo was a junior. And so there's a little bit of a connection there. I don't know that Syracuse is going to be interested in him or not, but he's very talented. Even though Penn State has had Drew Allar the last couple of years, he has still gotten on the field to the point where he has 19 combined touchdowns between passing and running over the last 2 seasons. So they're still finding ways to get him involved. I think he's got a ton of potential. I think there's a very high ceiling there. He's got 2 years of eligibility left. So it wouldn't surprise me if Syracuse perhaps got involved with him. Otherwise, we're kind of in a wait-and-see mode and to see how some of these things play out, because those guys that we've mentioned, the Ricky Collins and the Caden Salters and the Anthony Calandrias, all have visits scheduled to other places. So we're still waiting to see how those play out.
Washington State's quarterback, John Mateer, got in the portal. Any chance he flies back with the team?
I mean, that would be kind of a funny thing, would be to take Washington State's starting quarterback in the transfer portal and then go beat them in the Holiday Bowl. That would be kind of a funny little thing to happen there. But all of the rumors were that if he enters the portal, Oklahoma is a pretty strong favorite for him. I don't know how, if there's any connection to Syracuse, if he would consider Syracuse, but everything, all of the rumblings and rumors suggest that Oklahoma is a strong favorite for him. So I have to imagine that a school like that or someone else is probably going to throw a ton of money at him. He's really good. He might be the best quarterback in the transfer portal at this point. He's certainly in the discussion. So someone's going to throw a ton of money at him. There's no question about that. But if Syracuse were to find a way to get involved, he would be a home run for sure.
Mike, I want to get back to the Penn State transfer there for a second. Bo Prabula. I saw in his announcement that he talked about, given the current system in place, I feel like I have no choice. I'm paraphrasing here, but I feel like I have no choice. I have to put my name in now. The portal closes January or December 28th. Which, again, they could very well still be playing at that point. And in his statement, he said, I feel like I have to do this now. I'm planning to transfer, and the NCAA gives me no choice but to put my name in now. Listen, I know that this is kind of your area of expertise with recruiting and even, transfer portal stuff. Is there any talk of changing the dates and changing the guidelines so that, guys who are in the playoff aren't torn like this? They can still play out the rest of their time, and I know that we're seeing that in other places, right? Arizona State had somebody who said that, I'm going to enter the portal, but I'm going to continue to play with the team until we lose, and then I'll be open to transferring. What do you make of this whole thing, and do you think changes will be made?
I think that's something that's always going to be tweaked and to try to find the perfect formula. I don't know that there is a perfect formula because you have to take into account when semesters end and new semesters begin. So if you decided, well, let's move it until, the middle of January because we want to make sure all the bowl games and the playoffs and all those types of things are all done before we allow players to enter the transfer portal. Now, do they enter the transfer portal and make a decision to go elsewhere but still have to finish up the semester at the current institution that they're in and can't join your program until the summer as opposed to that spring? So there's that to consider. It's not just about what makes the most sense in terms of the bowl games and the playoffs. There's a lot of things involved with that. But, I wish there was a scenario where I do know it's possible, because Anwar Sparrow is an example at Syracuse. He's entered the portal but said, I'm going to play in the bowl game. So I would love a scenario where that was more the norm, where a guy like Bo would say, yeah, I'm transferring. I'm open to talking to teams and, potentially setting up visits here and there and all of that, but I'm still going to stay with my team and go through their playoff journey with them. Unfortunately, because he's a quarterback, the problem is those spots fill up so quickly. There's only a certain number of teams that are at the level he's looking to play at that will have available spots for a quarterback to come in and compete for a starting spot. And if he waits until after Penn State is done or waits until the very end of the transfer portal window, for example, then he costs himself potentially one of those spots, which could end up costing him money because of the NIL associated with one of those spots. So it's a very difficult situation for players. It's a very difficult situation for the teams. I'm not sure exactly what the solution to that is outside of making an exception and allowing players to, enroll after a semester has started and sort of disregarding the academics for that one semester in the spring following a football season. But that sets a dangerous precedent as well. I'm just not sure there's a perfect answer here, to be honest with you.
Got one more question for you, Mike. How did the weekend go with players coming and checking out the Georgetown game?
I mean, it went well. The regardless of being upset about the end result.
Yeah.
And I know there was an article put out, I think, by Syracuse.com that it was the second or third lowest attended Syracuse-Georgetown game since they've been playing that, since the Dome in 1981 or something like that. But regardless, the atmosphere was great. It was fun, especially after that altercation. Like the intensity just picked up significantly from that point on. I think it showcased Syracuse fans and the game day atmosphere to a very strong level. And so Syracuse certainly is going to be in the mix for a lot of those guys that were visiting. And they had a class of 2025 player who was on campus over the weekend as well, a running back. So, we'll see if it ends up paying dividends for Syracuse, but there's no question that it was a good impression to have those guys on campus to see what it's like to be in the Dome for a game.
All right, Mike, great stuff. We'll see you on the TV side of things tonight, 7 to 7:30 on News Channel 9. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Mike McAllister, CuseNation.com.
Got to get that plug in.
Yeah, always. And it just so happens we have him on this show Mondays, and we have him on TV on Mondays. So.
Steve, I don't know if you get around on social media and follow the people that are really upset about Syracuse basketball. There's something driving me absolutely bonkers that Syracuse fans are complaining about, like it's a Syracuse-only plan. Like, I had a fan stop me and ask me about it, and as I was walking back to interview Coach Autry at halftime.
Really?
It's so stupid that people are mad about this.
What is it?
I'll tell you after this commercial break.
Oh, great tease. Back after this on ESPN Radio.